Vinny, thank you. I appreciate the invite here, and it was great to see you a month ago. And we've talked. You and I have both been in the application software business for a lot of years, as you could tell from our foreheads, if nothing else. I spent 10 years at SAP and a number of other, mostly in the CRM space, quite frankly. And I've shared with many folks that I talked to that up until last year, I would say that in the nearly 40 years that I've been in the CRM space, the way the use of software has evolved maybe 3 or 4 years out of the 40, and the other is just changing platforms from what used to be green screen, client server, web, cloud, but people are still using it the same way. And especially in the area of sales, it's been more the user still working for the system and the system not working for them, right? And quite frankly, I was ready to hang up my cleats because it just hasn't changed enough. And then AI came up, right? And was astounding to me once you got past the original hype of you could write poems to your wife and girlfriend and you could write better emails. I was like, okay, yeah, but I'm in the business of selling enterprise software. What can I do? And then seeing the level of granularity that was available in a lot of these tools just amazed me, bowled me over. And like, finally, we're in a place where we've got some technology that can work for the system. With regard to the advent of generative AI and the ways that we can use these tools now, I really locked into the fact that for your most experienced resources across the enterprise, to me, this is about, in fact, improving efficiency because we know what good looks like. We know we've developed personal organizational processes that we know are the best in class, if you will. And there's a number of elements of any day-to-day activities that can be enhanced by these generative AI tools. And then I think potentially more importantly is improving the proficiency of the least experienced resources and frankly mimicking the efficiency, mimicking the best practice of the most experienced resources, especially as we're turning over across. And in some cases, it's forced. In other cases, it's just, manufacturing companies that have had sales guys working for them for 30, 40 years, and they have no choice but to hire, youngsters who don't have that organizational, knowledge, if you will. So it's a way of packaging that up and making it available. So what we built, what I'm going to show you is I like to say it's putting a saddle on a wild horse, right? So by now, most of us, if not all of us, have played around with these tools with ChatGPT, now DeepSync and Anthropic. And I'll go and I'll type something in, or companies have offered their own customized LLM or put some structure around, what they can access. And again, if they don't have enough inside the company, they're going to do it on their own outside. But imagine that we're playing around and I found a great answer and I want to share with you, Vinny. So what I'll do is I'll maybe cut and paste, put it into Word doc, send it to you and say, hey, try this, get really good answers. And of course, we all know you could ask the same, tool, the same question and get a different answer the second time. So what we've done is we've created a structure that allows us to create a template to, again, encapsulate those best practices. It's project oriented because you and I could share. I mean, there's a lot of teaming business in this high tech world of ours where you've got a virtual, account team, if you will, 5 or 6 folks. And so we can share and we could adjust the template at the project level. So we take a template, we create a project out of it, which in a sales situation could be, I'm selling a specific product to a specific company by a specific vendor. And we'll show you that example here shortly. And we're keeping up. It's open to any number of the LLMs, really anything that's got an API we can integrate with. So, and we have an admin function that allows you to choose if you want to limit what you have. And we don't, because of the way we use the APIs, we don't write back to anybody's model. So we're not training anybody's model. We can integrate because there's APIs, the whole world is API driven these days. So we can integrate not only with the LLMs on one hand, but the applications on the other end, right back to your Salesforces and your SAPs and so forth. And again, use either structured or unstructured data. So with that, I'm going to get straight into the demo because that will really
You're
clarify.
going to show a bunch of use cases? Oh, you got
Yeah.
templates.
So
Okay.
yeah. So in this example, I talked about template driven, and we could literally have 50 templates, right, across the enterprise. But I've set up an example here, and I have a team, here demo. So the idea is you could create separate teams here inside an organization. You have an HR team that has certain templates they use for HR, sales for sales, marketing for marketing. Here I have just a handful of examples where, and we're going to drill into the proposal template, but we could create a marketing plan for a new product coming out. Sales canvas is how to pitch my product I talked about before. This is really on the proficiency side where I could say, what's the best way to position my product to this customer based on what they care about, based on what their competitors care about. Investment opportunities, we use, we call it a venture canvas, or we're evaluating an investment, you have criteria. And in each of these, you see below each of the templates, cards and inputs. So the cards are essentially prompts. So every card is a prompt, and you'll see it when we get into the proposal template. And the input is a variable. So again, the sales canvas would be, I'm selling a product to a customer. Who's the customer? What's
So
the product, right?
Jim, you spend the first couple of minutes talking about the sales function, right? This is much broader than sales. You've got investment, so it sounds like it's a general purpose tool, or are you trying to focus more on sales as a start?
Yeah, so I jumped into it from a sales perspective, Vinny, because that's been, the 40 years that I've been focused in enterprise software. But what we're finding is that it's this type of capability can be used across the enterprise. So the example will be more sales oriented, but thank you for that call out. And even here, it still looks more like sales, but we've got folks using it to assess the documentation of a project and come up with recommendations for improving it. We've got, assessing CVs for a particular project and who's the best suited for it, right? It's really anything you would otherwise use Gen AI for, like whatever companies who are starting to investigate. We're also creating something for build to order, engineer to order CPQ area, which is not your traditional CPQ, right? So again, that's more sales, but there's nothing. I've got people using it for planning vacations, and the idea is you and I could both go to ChatGPT and plan a vacation, right? We could say we're going to these cities. Give me lay me out a game plan, right? But I could create a template for it where the inputs are the cities, what I care about. I've done it for helping people look for colleges for their kids, right? Where the variables are area of the country, how competitive am I looking for? What's my major likely to be? How far from a body of water, whatever, right? And all that's out there, that could be a template. So there's no limit. But when you think about where the ROI is, sales obviously comes to mind
Sure.
because nothing happens till something gets sold, right? But I also see this. We're starting to talk to some universities that are starting to teach AI to students and giving them a palette to paint with where they could save their work, where they could share amongst their peers. And for those of us who are all learning like how to prompts work, it's a way of refining prompts in a template so that it really is a continuous improvement cycle, right? So with that, I'm gonna I'm gonna use a demo that's already been created, but I'm first gonna show you. We're gonna work off this proposal template. So I mentioned I worked for SAP for 10 years. I wanted to use some real companies here, so we all understand them, but they're all in the public domain, right? So I said, okay, let's say I'm SAP and I'm selling into the pharmaceutical space, which I spent some time in. And so there's generic capabilities of an SAP and supply chain and finance and HR and so forth, but there's also specific industry solutions. So one of them is track and trace, right? Happens to be an offering that SAP has for pharmaceutical companies. So what I did was first I created in the files, I had Gen AI create fictitious proposals of track and trace to Fortune class pharma companies like Bayer, J&J, and Roche. So these are different fictitious proposals, but I use Gen AI to produce them, right? And now I'm saying I want to sell to Pfizer. So my inputs for creating a proposal for Pfizer would be based on prior proposals that I've
Right.
done for the Bayers and the J&J and the Roches, but enriched with, in this case, the latest 10K from Pfizer, Pfizer's proxy statement. So it's like take the way we position track and trace and farm in general, but make it as specific to Pfizer based on what they care about. So these are files I use for inputs. The template was this proposal template. And again, this is whatever you choose, right? This was just I think we use Gen AI to say what's a good, table of contents for a good proposal, right? You have commercial model, executive summary, implementation approach, and so forth, right? So we can create, this template really can be, whatever we want it to be, and and then we use the template to create, and then the inputs, by the way, one more time, the inputs are that I've worked out what the cost and the time would be. And again, we could use Gen AI to create that, but for the purpose of this demonstration, I say we know what the cost and the timeline is going to be, so work that in to the proposal as an input. The target in this case, the company is going to be SAP, the target's going to be Pfizer, and the solution is track and trace, right? So those are the variables. That's the solution from the vendor that I'm selling to that company. And in the case of proposal, I'm using those as variables. I could add other variables
So
like
the proposal would be mostly the wording you would move over, or how would you get the numbers in the proposal?
yeah. So again, for the purpose of demonstration, we'll assume that that was done, or that maybe we have an out of box, offering for that. But if we want to use Gen AI, then I would have a few others, and I would use different variables to figure out the cost, right? So just for quick and dirty, because this is not my area of expertise, I chose to use that as a variable that I would plug in. And again, this is a iterative cycle, so we can use whatever you can use Gen AI for. We can templatize is really the point, right? And use whatever variables you choose. So I can use so what I do is I say, I want to use that template for a project, and I'll put in how long it's likely to be, what the cost, the target, the company, and the solution, and move on. And in the interest of time, I've done this, right? So I'm going to go to the projects, and we've got a project for Pfizer, right? And here, you saw what each card is, executive summary. What does it mean to partner with SAP? What's the governance and change management, right? And I've got these different cards, which are my prompts. I can add a card to it. So the template had 8 cards, but this is now the project of selling track and trace to Pfizer. So for the project, I could add another card, right? And I could say something like competitive differentiation. Excuse me, competitive differentiation. And if I want to see like how does, and here I can either use, when I go into the prompt, I can either, I can use the variable or I can hard code it, right? Since I know this is the project. So how does Pfizer differentiate itself from its competitors, right? Just in case I might want to know that, right? And then I could say, well, which LLM would I like to use? And let's just say I'll go with ChatGPT 4, right? So you see that I can leverage, any number of LLMs, and each company can isolate which ones they might want to limit their team to, right? And so, and then when I get my answer, like some of these others, it shows the citation. And it said, I used, part of my proposal to Roche, J&J, and my offering for track and trace, right? And it also remembers what LLM I used, right? And if I don't like the answer from that LLM, I can just change it. And this was Claude Sonnet. I can refresh and re-ideate, and it'll give it to me what GPT 4.0 said, right? So I can tell it whether I want to use the files, whether I want to use the web. And the web is more like Perplexity, some of these real-time, Gen AI tools. Otherwise, it'll just use the model, right? And so I can decide, and I can even tell it which of the files that I want to use for my inputs and evaluation, right?
So
And then,
ChatGPT
yeah,
gets your prompt looking for competitive differentiation. What other proprietary data are you feeding to ChatGPT?
it's whatever I choose, right? So in this case, I can look at the files that I loaded. I loaded the 3 proposals that I talked about. I loaded the track and trace information that I had, the expertise. I loaded and the Pfizer 10K and the proxy, right? So it will use whatever I tell it to use. I could say use the web. If I use the web, I actually can even it will I think in a couple of these cases, let me turn on. Yeah. So, this could search the web based on certain criteria, right? So I could tell it
What if you
what to
didn't?
use the
What if you
web.
wanted to use something? What if you want to use private databases? You don't want to expose anything to ChatGPT or Anthropic or
Yeah.
DeepSeek. Could you change the um, model,
Yeah,
large
yeah,
or small?
absolutely. So anything that's got an API, so as long as it's got an API, we could read to it. So like when DeepSeek came out, we added it within 3 minutes, right? Because it was already out there in the public domain, had its API. We go through a third-party fireworks so that doesn't, write back to the model. But if you have an internal LLM or vector store, we can absolutely, again, what we're adding here is that's what I meant, open and trusted. So we'll use the sources that you want to isolate. What we're doing is creating the template, right? To be able to templatize, mimic the best practices, make the most experienced resources more efficient, make the least experienced resources more proficient, and to be able to share. So I could add you to this
Showing
team,
and you're
and
showing
we're
the
doing this
exact
together.
source of the for each of the cards.
Yeah, so we show what we use for the LLM. We show what file was used. If it used a web, we'll show the web access, right? And we also put that in the output as an option. So whenever I'm finished creating my project, I can export it. If I added a couple cards that I think are a better way to do this, then I could create a new template with the extra new cards. But I can also export to a PDF, and I could decide whether to show the actual prompts or the titles, because Claude actually repurposes the title and the answer. So with Claude, I might want to take that out. And then you'll see the references, at in each of the cards, and you could turn that on or off, right? So if you want a clean output, fine. If I want to make sure that it's trusted, I'll leave in the references
Kind
of
of like
where
foot,
I got that
kind of like foot,
information.
kind of like footnotes in a book, right?
Exactly, right? So I can
If
do
you
with
if
or
you want
without
to
the footnotes.
if you want to show off, you have 1,100 footnotes in the book.
Exactly, right? And so we're going to be continuing to add granularity. Do you want the footnotes at the card level? Do you want the footnotes at the bottom of
Sure.
the file, right? On the output, I can select which cards, right? So maybe I don't want that competitive differentiation, card showing up because I wanted that as a reference, but I want to send the rest to the client, right? So a lot of variability. Again, to summarize, uh, template driven, project oriented, open to either outside, LLMs and technologies, or internal, to your point. Um, Project oriented in the fact that you and I could share a project. So we apply the templates each and every time. It's And then again, we're keeping up. It's open to those strategies, right? So every day there's a different, you end up with a different LLM capability. And so one day Anthropic is better. And there's some websites out there we're going to put some links into just to give people guidance. Who does better with files? Who does better with data in files, right? Because that seems to be changing every day. I know there's all kinds of concerns about DeepSeek, but one of the things, if you're not putting anything too proprietary, the fact that they show you how they thought is really great for inexperienced resources, right? It's like, what was the thinking process to get to these answers? Just the pre-paragraphs on the think part is a pretty good education for a lot of new users, right? So anyway, so that's the idea, Vinny. We're continuing to improve the granularity in the admin function. This can be set up on any customer's private hosting where we don't even have access to it. So it can either be a shared environment or a private environment, sort of like the private hosted, if you will, and some
So,
of the
so,
other enterprise software.
so where have you tested it? Talk about some of the early experiences, feedback.
Yeah, so we've got the our internal we're a consulting organization, so we're using it to evaluate, the output of some of our consulting engagements and the documentation. We're using it also to evaluate CVs. Certainly using it for researching customers that we're having a conversation with that we haven't worked with before. So like that sales canvas is being used by a number of our folks and some of our customers. If I go to the template here, the sales canvas, you're selling to a customer. What are their strategies? What are your opportunities against their strategies for what you're selling, for the solution you're selling? And what's the potential areas of ROI and what are the steps to close, right? So we're using that quite a bit. And I've got a number of folks that are just starting with that and then adding, what they want from that. We've got, as I mentioned, I've got a few colleges, nonprofits that are using this to forge what's the best way to pitch our services to a potential sponsor of our program. So they're doing that, based on what's been stated in the public in their support of projects like ours or organizations like ours. So that's what we're working with, and it's again what we've been tweaking in the last piece that I'm not ready to demo today, which I think is just another slice here, Vinny, for guys like you and I call it the second life for folks that have built up 30, 40 years of experience like you and I have. It can also be used as a bit of a black box. And we've got some people using it for that are doing like business evaluation. And so the inputs, so I've got a gentleman, he's got 18 inputs to help evaluate a company, whether they're worth funding. And he'd prefer not to expose the whole project or template to that company. So he's sending out a form and that comes back. We now have a forms input. So I could send you a form, you fill it out, and it comes back in forms. And then I'll run the program, I'll run the project using my template, send you the output, right? So that's one of our latest iterations of being able to sort of, there's some folks, again, that have taken the package from their companies, but they're walking away with 30 years of experience. See a lot of fractional,
Yeah.
resources out there.
Yep.
And this is a way they could protect their IP.
Great. So where can people find out more?
So I think we've just stood up the website, Hypercard.ai. So
You're on LinkedIn. They can find you there, right?
certainly on LinkedIn. That's the
Yeah.
better. Thank you very much. I think I'm just Jim Dash Goldfinger, and I don't know there's many other Jim Goldfingers on LinkedIn. So that's probably the easiest way.
After James Bond, who knows how many Goldfingers there are?
Yeah. My first manager, sales manager's last name was Bond. We had some fun.
Yep. Well, when you worked as long as you have, you're just full of anecdotes, full of experiences. So, Jim, thanks for taking the time.
Thank you, Vinny. I appreciate the opportunity.